Hey everyone, I'm Ben Staples, Head of Product at RetroRabbit, and today I'm going to walk you through how a typical team would use our tool to have more effective retrospectives. You can reach us at retrorabbit.io, and this is our landing page. To get started, you'll click on the Start a Free Trial call to action, and the first step of using RetroRabbit is integrating with your Slack workspace. So here you can see I've created a Slack workspace called Carrots Inc. for this demo because, of course, we're rabbits and we love to farm carrots. And we're going to set up Slack to work with the RetroRabbit bot. The main part of our integration is making sure that when you add retrospective notes in Slack where your team is already communicating, you can port those notes magically using the RetroRabbit tool over to our web-based Retrospective Board. We'll see that a little bit later in the demo, but that's where you run your retrospective meetings. We give you two options. Either you can set up online or you can set up in Slack, whatever your preference is. For this demo, we're going to be setting this up online. Generally, you'll be using public channels for your retrospectives to make sure that everyone that needs to be there can be there, including your product manager, your scrum master. But if you wanted to, you could run your retrospectives in a private channel. Now we're going to select which channel we're adding RetroRabbit to. So I've created Scrum Team number 1, which is where this Carrots Incorporated runs most of their meetings and talks as a team. We have a few different options for retrospective topics. You can choose from a template. We offer a few different options. So for example, many people use the standard what went well, what didn't go, what didn't go well, what did we learn. You can also, if you want to, completely customize these retrospective topics by typing in whatever you'd like. For now, we're going to keep these topics. Then you select a name for your first sprint. Having unique names for each sprint helps with reporting. So we'll keep the default of sprint number 1. So now we're going to go over to our Slack channel where we added RetroRabbit and start having our retrospective. So if I go to our Slack workspace, you can see that RetroRabbit is now in the channel Scrum Team 1 that we decided to add it to. And we can start adding retrospective notes in this channel. So to add a retrospective note, you can type retro and then whatever your note is. So for example, for this sprint, it seems like we had a great demo. When you hit enter, you can also decide which topic in the retrospective to add that note to. So for example, this is something that went well. And you can either decide to be anonymous or decide to be identified in this retro note. So if I want my name to show up, I'll select public. So you can see I've added that retrospective note and now it shows up here. And as team members add other retrospective notes, you can see more of those show up as time goes on. So now let's go back and add some more notes as an example. So I type /retro, and I'm going to add a negative one now. Let's say that there was lots of tech debt. This is something that didn't go so well, and I'm going to do anonymous now. And you can see that that retrospective note now shows up in the overall retrospective summary. Now, whenever we want, we can end the period where we're collecting retrospective notes and start the retrospective meeting. So you can do that by clicking this call to action here, or if a bunch of people are talking in your channel, you can always type /retro and have this same instance pop up again. So to start the retro meeting, we'll click this button here. And we get this nice little summary. So we can confirm that our current sprint, which is sprint number 1, has 9 total notes and has 3 total participants, which is great to see. So let's confirm and start the retrospective meeting. Next, we'll click Manage Retro Online and be taken to our web-based board. But you can also see some great opportunity to view what others have added in terms of retrospective notes. If you wanted to, you could also click these thumbs up to vote on different retrospective notes before you get to the actual web-based retrospective. So this is our web-based tool for retrospectives, and you can see we have the same topics that we added when we set up this sprint, and you can see all of the different retrospective topics magically being ported over into this sprint. You can vote on retrospective topics here or remove votes. Sorting is also possible, so you can sort by user, you can sort by votes, you can sort by date that something is entered, because as a reminder, RetroRabbit allows you to enter in retrospective notes throughout the duration of your sprint. That's the biggest value that we offer, is that no longer are you going to be forgetting all the stuff that's happening in the beginning of a sprint, because you can always have reminders and add retrospective notes as you go. If you wanted to during your retro meeting, you can also add new notes. And then others can vote on it, just like a normal retrospective meeting. You can also, if you need to, stack notes like you can see here. So for example, if I wanted to group two notes together because they were similar, I would click and drag and then release to group them. All right, so we've reviewed stacking items, voting on different retrospective notes. Another thing we can do in the web tool is move different cards from one column to another. Let's say originally we thought lots of rain this summer was something that didn't go well, but instead we learned a lot about rain or rain-related topics. We can move that to the What Did We Learn column. Once we're done the bulk of our retrospective meeting, we can tie this retro closed by adding action items. So for example, I know that Evan was responsible for a lot of tech debt, so we're going to make sure that Evan follows up and keeps an eye on the squad's tech debt for the next sprint. Then we select who we're assigning this action item to in the drop-down and click Add. Now, if we wanted to, we could revisit this web-based tool here and mark this action item as complete. We could also edit it in the drop-down here and set up reminders. And as other team members are adding other action items throughout this retrospective meeting, you'll see they'll come up right here. Now, the great part about RetroRabbit is that as you add action items and take action and make voting decisions in your retrospective meeting, all of that will actually show up in Slack, and we have basically a seamless integration between Slack and our online web tool. So you can see another person has added additional action items, and you can set up reminders here as well. So RetroRabbit will ping the person who is assigned to make sure that this gets done during the sprint. And that's the summary of your retrospective meeting. Now, if you start adding new retrospective notes, these will then be attached to your next retro meeting. Last retro was a great meeting. This sprint is going well. So again, we'll assign a topic and decide whether or not we want our name attached. So you can see the name defaults to sprint number 2, and we're off on our way for our next sprint and our next effective retrospective. Thanks so much for hanging with me, and I hope you learned a little bit about how to use RetroRabbit to have the most effective retrospective meetings you can.